Hi guys, welcome to another video. Today we'll be talking about what kind of paints you need to start blur painting. And I will also explain a little about the different types of paint and how they work. Alright guys, if you're new to the channel then don't forget to click like and subscribe, because I will be posting a lot more content in the future. So guys, when it comes to paint, you got a few types of paint that are like basic, and I want to talk to you about these paints first. First of all, there are a few types of paint which I think it's really important to know the difference. These types of paint are, we got opaque, we got semi-opaque, we got transparent, and we got a candy. Now these are all black because black will show the biggest difference between these types of paint on white paper. So I'll show you the first one and explain a little about that. So we will be starting with opaque. Alright, so I got black opaque in my chamber now. Now the most important thing you need to know about opaque is that it covers very well. As you can see, it becomes really dark. Now if you would look at opaque in a microscope, then it would look a little like this. Now these dots represent pigments, because an opaque paint is a highly pigmented paint with heavy pigments, meaning that these pigments have no transparency at all. So that means it covers any color really well. Only a few coats and you won't see anything of the color that's underneath. Alright, moving on to our Createx Wicked Black, which is a semi-opaque paint. Meaning, as you can see, even after a few coats, this is still lighter. And the spots on the outside of this line are much finer than the ones on this line. As you can see, this is more of a subtle black. So if you would look under the microscope on this paint, then it would look a little something like this. So it's smaller pigments and they are a little bit more transparent. Still, if you want to cover an entire color, you can still do it with a semi-opaque. So if you just keep on layering, as you can see, eventually it will get really black. But a semi-opaque is like in between an opaque and a transparent paint. You can do both ways, especially when you thin it down and use a little bit of 40-30 balancing clear. Then you will get a more transparent paint which you can do a lot with. Alright, moving on to our next color. This is black magenta. It's a Wicked Detail black magenta to be correct. And why not Wicked Detail black? That is because black magenta is actually a magenta color, so dark it looks like black. But the difference between black and magenta is that magenta is actually a color and black is not considered a real color actually. Black and white tend to have heavier pigments than colors, and that is why a color can be much more transparent than a white or a black. So if you take black magenta then you will know this is a much more transparent black than an actual transparent black, which gives you more control. So black magenta is ideal for doing very light shading, very subtle black accents. So as you can see, this is only a few layers and it's a very subtle gray toward a gray with a black core. I can get the core even more black, as you can see. Now if you would look this under the microscope, then you would notice that the pigments are even smaller and even more transparent. There are still pigments in this paint, but they are very subtle, so that makes this a very transparent paint. Now, last but not least, we have Candy 2O Black from Createx in our chamber now. As you can see, if I only do one stroke, you barely see a thing. 3 or 4 strokes and you see a light shading. About 10 strokes, it's still quite subtle. Now if I go in closer, you see it gets darker because it's more concentrated. But the idea about Candy Black is this is my favorite shading and detailing paint because it's actually a dye. It has no pigments, so it is super transparent. So that means if we would take this under the microscope, it would look like this. There are no pigments in this paint. It's a dye, which means that anything underneath, it will always shine through depending on how thick you layer the paint. Because if you look at candies, this is red, for example, it's blood red, as you can see, and still it looks super dark. That means if you would layer this like a lot of times, and it's hard to say how many because it depends on how much you thin it down with 40-30 and 40-11. But if you layer this a lot, then it will get really dark red. But still it would shine through, let's say, holographic foil or aluminium foil effects, because it's a dye. It's a really awesome paint to use on something that you want to let shine through, or you do subtle detailing. So that is the huge difference between a candy paint and an opaque going all the way to a transparent. These all have pigments. No matter how much you thin it down, these pigments, they don't break, they just become diluted because they are spreading more, but still you have pigments in there. While with a dye, there is no pigment, so you always shine through what's underneath. So if you're painting a lot of holographic foiled lures, or you're using a lot of aluminium tape on your lures, or when you like transparent lures, like when you're painting blanks that are transparent and you want to save the transparency a little, then Candy 2O is a really awesome paint to play with because it will always leave what's underneath. So if you're using this on holographic foil, the foil is gonna shine through really beautiful. It's gonna give a lot of depth to it. So guys, what does this all mean? It means, for instance, when you've painted this whole lure and you want to paint fins on there, or you want to do the gill plates and you want them to stick out again from the background you have painted, then the best option is to start with an opaque. Then you can start with an opaque base and then paint other opaques or transparents on there depending on the effect you want. But that will make it stick out from the rest again, because an opaque covers the entire background without shining anything through. Now let's say you want to darken up the back, then a semi-opaque is a great option, because if you thin it down a little bit, you get a semi-opaque effect, a little bit more transparent, and you can darken the back, but you still have control, so you can maybe darken it a little less on the sides, so it shades or it fades out towards the side of the lure, but it gets really dark on the back and it still has a good coverage. And if you want to do a little bit more detailed effect, like spots on the background or faded striping, then transparent paint is perfect for that, because you still can make it really dark, but it's transparent, so you will keep this kind of shading effect. Like the background still would be a little bit visible depending on how many layers you use and how much you thin it down, but the transparent paint is going to be more subtle when you use it. And if you're also painting foiled lures like this aluminium foiled bait or holographic foils, then Candy 2.0 is your best choice, because this will preserve the foil better than any other of these colors, because these have pigments in it, and the Candy 2.0 is a dye, so the foil will shine through and it just gives a lot more depth to it. It's an unbelievable effect you can achieve with that. It's really beautiful. And also for the most subtle shading, then I like to use Candy 2.0, because you have so much control and you can like put a little shade, like you can see here on the sheet. It's barely visible, but you can add such light details on your lure with a candy paint. Now when it comes to brands, there are a lot of brands out there, because I only stick to 2 brands for almost 99% of my painting, which is Createx and Vallejo. Now the biggest difference between these two is that Createx has a lot of different types of paint and a lot of colors. You got the Hot Rod Sparkle, you got the Cosmic Sparkle, you got Candy 2.0, you got Transparent, you got the Wicked Detail, you got so many choices and so many different colors as well. And for Vallejo you also got Pearls and Metallics, of course, and you got Game Air and you got Model Air. But the biggest difference between these two is that Vallejo shoots better even when you don't thin it down, and Createx always needs to be thinned down, and best is you add a little bit of 40-30 balancing clear as well, because that makes the paint adhere better and also flow a lot better too. But I will make a video about that in the future. But if you're a total beginner, then Vallejo Game Air is a really good choice, because they shoot really easy compared to Createx, which always needs to be thinned down. Now you can also thin down Vallejo. I sometimes thin it down to get a little bit more of a transparent paint. Then I use the Airbrush thinner from Vallejo itself, which is really important. Don't mix up different brands, it's not a good idea. Now it shoots easier, and I'll show you guys what I mean by that. I'll first shoot Createx Opaque without any thinner, just pure from the bottle. Alright, so as you can see, pure from the bottle. Now why am I not shooting the Wicked Black or the Detail Black? Because this is a semi-opaque paint, and I want to show you a little bit the differences between like the same paint. Now I could take Wicked Black, but the problem is this is so thick I cannot even shoot it pure from the bottle. So this gives you an idea. It shoots quite well. You see there is a little bit of hesitation here and there in my lines. That is because it's already drying on the needle. Already got some tip dry on there. I don't know if you can see that. But yeah, it gives you an idea. It shoots okay, but it shoots much better when you thin it down and add a little bit of 40-30 balancing clear to it. So now guys, Vallejo straight from the bottle. So as you can see guys, there's barely any tip dry on there. The lines are very clean. I have a little bit of hesitation there. Might be a little bit of paint residue that's left on the needle from the previous paint as well. The coverage is really nice, and as you can see, these lines are very heavy, while this is very fine. The pigment on this paint is much more fine. like a semi-opaque would be, and this is like an opaque would be. So you can see the darker tone that's in the opaque compared to the Vallejo paint. But this is a great beginner paint. It shoots really well straight from the bottle, really easy, and you got some really nice colors in there as well. We sell them in a few different colors at Lure Blanks as well. I'll leave a link in the description below, as well as these more special colors from Wicked Detail, like the sepia and the moss green and everything, you can find at Lure Blanks, and the Candy 2O's as well. As a beginner, you will notice that you will need a few colors to do some decent painting, and that's why Vallejo paints are really good, because these are smaller bottles, which makes them a lot cheaper than the Createx bottles. So I'm not saying that Createx is a bad beginner paint, I'm just saying that it takes a little bit more practice to get the right cocktail going to shoot well with the airbrush, using the 4011 and 4030 combined with this paint, because Createx paints are more concentrated, and that's why they need a little bit of reducing. Now, if you're still new to learn painting and you want to learn a little bit more about shooting metallics and pearls, then I have a great video for you right here. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, and see you next time. Bye bye.